Greetings, everyone. Today's topic is the impact of equity and health equity in board service. I am Dr. Vivienne Pierce McDaniel, a member of the Nurses on Board Coalition Grant Steering Committee, the immediate past president of the Central Virginia chapter of the National Black Nurses Association, and the former interim executive director of the National Black Nurses Association. I was the inaugural chair of the Virginia Nurses Association's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council and an Equity and Inclusive Excellence Ambassador and consultant for James Madison School of Nursing. Dr. Stamps.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. McDaniel. And it's such a pleasure to be with everyone this afternoon. My name is Deborah Stamps, and I'm the founder and chief executive officer for Deborah Stamps Consulting. I come to you with more than 30 years of progressive healthcare leadership experience, and I am an internationally recognized authority on workforce development, DEI, nursing education, and leadership. And it has been a pleasure to be a part of the journey in partnership with Nurses on Board's Coalition and the National Association for Ethnic Minority Nurses.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stamps. So welcome to this Nurses on Board Coalition session. Dr. Stamps and I are honored to present this body of work for the Nurses on Board Coalition. I will refer to that as NOBC, and for the National Coalition of Ethnic Minority Nurses Association, which I will refer to as NSEMNA. And we are here to support underrepresented nurses for successful board service. So welcome. The overall goal of the program is to increase health equity across America through the increased number of minority and underrepresented minority nurses on boards, commissions, and on appointments. To support this effort, the American Nurses Foundation funded $95,745 in grant money. 8 historically minoritized and underrepresented nurse organizations partnered with NOBC to create and implement the program.
So before we get started, I'd like to ask all of you to pull out your phones and participate in a pre-education survey. Let's just take a few minutes for you to complete this pre-education survey. Thank you so much. Your feedback is really important to us to ensure that we are meeting the needs of all of you in board service. We have a packed agenda this afternoon, and we are going to get started. We actually have some objectives and there's 3. But we hope that you take away at a minimum these 3 objectives: defining common language and critical concepts, and achieving health equity through board service, discussing the implications of health inequities and the role that you play as a board member, and also applied the tenets of cultural humility in a case study. The purpose of this session is to ensure that we provide learning for board members, new and seasoned, to ensure that their governance and leadership significantly contribute to reducing health disparities and promoting health equity within the communities in which they serve. We would like to start out with the acknowledgement of the indigenous lands. What's interesting tonight is that I am actually in Rochester, New York, and Dr. McDaniel is in Virginia, Chesapeake, Virginia. And so we thought it was important that we acknowledge the indigenous lands in which we are each sitting, and for all of you to reflect where you may be this evening. So for me, the land on which I am gathered is seized territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which includes the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk, and Tuscarora nations. I'd like to take a moment for us to take a moment of silence for us to reflect on where we are as the result of the history of violence and displacement. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stamps. And the Commonwealth of Virginia was one of the first points of contact between the Algonquin, Siouan, and Iroquois peoples and European settlers. We acknowledge the presence of our first people on the land where I am located and honor all the first people of Virginia. And when we honor those people, we cannot forget the past. So we are honoring people from the past and the present. We express gratitude for their continued stewardship over the land and waterways. We seek to honor the history of this land and to maintain and nurture our relationships and partnerships with all the federally recognized tribes, as well as the Nottoway, the Mattaponi, and the Potawatomi Indian tribes of Virginia. It is with humility and empathy that we look to our past, and with hope and equity that we look to our future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. McDaniel. And as we think about service, we must also think about labor. And we must acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development throughout history and across time, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their ascendants who suffered the horror of the transatlantic trafficking of their people, chattel slavery, and Jim Crow. We are indebted to their labor for their sacrifice, and we must acknowledge the tremors of the violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be felt and witnessed today. Thank you for allowing us to ground our discussion today. So we're going to move into common language and critical concepts. It's really important that as we go move forward, that we have a foundational understanding. There's so many definitions. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has evolved over the years. And so this is foundational so that when we are speaking, we're speaking from a common place.
So, Dr. Stamps, I want to ask you the question. What is different about us?
Many things are different. So when you think about the difference that we live in different cities, different schools. We have different family makeups. Just as much as we have differences that drive our identity and who we are, we have some similarities.
Yes, we do. We are both nurses. But let me tell you, I grew up very rural. And you grew up in a city, correct?
Yes.
So you see how when we talk about diversity, it's the mere presence of difference. And it's so complex that you really can't give the definition, because it's just what we just described. And as Dr. Stamps said, it's mostly driven by dimensions of our identity. So let's talk about that just a little bit. Um, First, the model that we're using here, Goddard, Swartz, and Rowe have been in the DEI space for over 50 years. It's just amazing. I know I became more aware and I got more involved in diversity in 2011. Dr. Stamps, you may have done it even before I did, but it's just amazing that this is still significant today. Now, this model that we have here is the newer model. It's more a more recent one. But we need to bring ourselves to realize that advocacy for DEI is a universal one. And when we look at the different levels, when we look at the dimensions, personality is all about openness, um, agreeableness, things of that nature. Your internal dimensions, they are around age, gender, sexual orientation, your physical ability, even your ethnicity. And then your external dimensions, your geographic location. I just told you that I was raised rural. Dr. Stamps was raised inner city. It all makes a difference. It all, especially when we look at the intersection. And then with your organizational dimensions, those organizational dimensions, just think about it. Work location. Are you affiliated with a union? Your management status, those type things. And I want you to just think about how these attributes intersect. So, for example, we all know that discrimination, bias, power dynamics, we know that they exist, right? And they exist in varying degrees throughout these attributes. But when we are looking at diversity, we want to make a promise to ourselves that diversity exists across all of them. Dr. Stamps, do you have anything to add to this?
So many times when individuals hear the term diversity, they automatically go to race and ethnicity.
Yes.
And diversity is broader than that. Just as you shared that in this model, the four layers of diversity, the dimensions, there's so much that make us who we are and make us different. And believe it or not, we're probably all more similar than we are different. But we know that with the presence of diversity, we have that difference of thought and experience that comes to the table when we're making decisions about the greater good.
I'll tell you what, I love when we can sit at a table and I can see the diversity of thought just moving forward. I can, you know, you there are different people sitting at the table and they all are coming with something different. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I just do.
There's strength in that.
Yes, it is. The cultural iceberg is one of the models that I use a lot when I am presenting. This model is from Hall. It was done in, I think he developed it in 1976. And it's an analogy of culture. And when I look at this iceberg, I think about, oh, I can see some of the things about Dr. Stamps from just looking at Dr. Stamps or from a brief conversation with Dr. Stamps, right? We can talk about the kind of food she might like, and we can talk about I know that she speaks English. I mean, not know that she speaks that she's bilingual or she speaks another language, but in my conversation with her and communicating with her, I know she speaks English. I may Dr. Stamps and I have danced together, so I know that I can see that about her. But what really dwells deeper, and how might I find out those things? The only way that I would be able to find out those things is if I spent more time in her culture. Say I leave from my little rural town and I go up to Rochester or some other part of New York. And life would be different there, you know. But I spend time with her. We're together for the whole day, and I learned all of these different things about her because we have spent this time together. That is kind of what it's all about. What Hall is saying is that you can only learn about the internal culture of others by actively participating in their culture. So you think about what you see at the surface, but you will not move into really knowing that person until you go deeper into what their culture is. So when we think about internal, and that's implicitly learned, right? It's unconscious, it's difficult to change, and it's subjective knowledge. But when we talk about external, it's explicitly learned, it's conscious, and it's easily changed and objective knowledge. So I just challenge everyone to get to know someone and their culture better before forming any opinions about that person or that group of people. Dr. Stamps, do you have anything else you want to add?
I think you covered it very nicely. There's, the bottom line is there's so much to each of us. There's things we can see above the surface,
Mhm.
and so much underneath that makes us who we are, our life experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, but they all shape who we are. And we know that we bring ourselves, our authentic selves, wherever we go.
So, Dr. Stamps, well, no, I'll wait until the next slide and I'll ask you this question.
Okay.
So you hear me talking about equity a lot. I do a lot of work in Virginia. In fact, in Virginia, there is now a new scholarship, Dr. Stamps, in my name, the Dr. Vivienne McDaniel Health Equity Scholarship.
Oh,
Uh,
wonderful.
yeah, it's so exciting because I am deeply engrossed in this work. And um, this this slide that we're showing, I don't know if you remember the slide that Robert Wood Johnson used to have before this one. It had all of the bicycles on it, and for equality, everybody got the same size bicycle. And to show the equity, they made every bicycle individual for the person. So but I love this. And Dr. Stamps, let's just talk a little bit about some of the conversation we had around this particular infographic.
Yeah. For me, equality, when you think about it, is everyone gets the same. Everyone's able to cross the street. Um, However, when we take the accessibility, which is another variable in diversity, and we truly allow everyone to get what they need to be able to do the same thing, that's when we're talking about equity. So this pictorial is amazing. I love it because we have someone that is blind, They have a stick, a seen stick. We have someone in a wheelchair. We have a child and an adult. But what I love as we move from equality that everyone's crossing the street to equity is that for the person who may not be able to see, but they can hear, there's an adaptation of a sound, or someone saying it's safe to cross the street, not having to guess or depend on someone. When there is the opportunity, because I might not be able to see as well, the visual sign that it's time to walk and or not walk and be safe. So I think that this really truly to me speaks to accessibility needs of all. Because sometimes when you're in a conversation, you might miss the fact that you can walk across the street until you might hear that, okay, it's safe to cross, right? Or you might not see that flashlight. So I just think this to me speaks a ton to accessibility. And that's what it's about, regardless of your circumstance, regardless to any physical challenges that you may have or barriers or certain conditions, you are able to have the same, achieve the same thing of crossing the street safely.
And what I remember is the first time I heard the audible, it goes, wait. And then it tells you when you can go. And I just, it's wonderful because, you know, we didn't always have that. And I just love the way this is showing so much. I mean, we're going to talk about inclusivity, but this definitely is equity and inclusivity because everyone is something for everyone here.
Just to take it a little step further, you know, many organizations, and as you're on your participating on boards, you might want to look at, you know, how accessible is the organization to the community in which you live and you're serving. Many times our websites, people go and they Google us and they go to your website, but they can't access the information because it's not in the language that they speak, or it's not able to be adjusted for the size of the font or the brightness. You know, sometimes bright light doesn't do well for some people, and some people need a little darker to be able to read. And so that's another example of where organizations and board members could advocate for creating equitable environments, such as your website facing that's something that faces your community. And so it's great we have a website, but if people can't access it, it doesn't do us any good. It's not serving our purpose.
So glad you said that because I was about to ask you. Remember, I said I was wanted to ask you a question on the previous slide. I was about to say, can we tell our viewers, our audience, how this ties into board service? So thank you so much. You did it without me even asking. That's what working together with you, you know, this is wonderful. You know exactly what it is that I want.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. And then when we think about inclusion, you know, this is active. It has to be intentional. We can't say that we want an environment where everyone feels that they belong and you have a voice if we don't actively work at it. You know, in the words of the Netflix chief diversity officer Vernon Myers, diversity is being asked to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. When you think about it, you have a seat at the table, but if you can't speak, you're not really included. It's that active participation that's needed to truly have inclusion. It's the act of dancing at the party that says you're included, you're part of. So if you take away anything as a board member today, being active and intentional is really important. If you're going to have active engagement, whether that is of your community in which you're serving, other colleagues on the board, and even the staff and employees of the organization in which you're serving. Moving on to belonging. Belonging is really an outcome of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's that feeling of security and being supported. As a board member, when you're starting out new, you want to know that you have a mentor or someone that you can, run things by. Make sure you check your understanding with, right? There's a trust. When you're new to the board, and we know that board terms transition off, you want to know that you're accepted, that you're included, that you're going to have an identity as a member of that board. There are both qualitative perspectives when it comes to inclusion, being able to be your authentic self. We're going to talk a little, we spoke in one of the other sessions that, there's an interview, and that interview is bi-directional. It's not just you being interviewed for the position, but you're also interviewing the board, because do I feel like I will have a seat, that I would be comfortable and able to have a voice? Will I be able to be engaging? And when we have that sense of belonging, that helps with retention. It helps with recruitment, because then other people hear how wonderful it is in this board and they come. And so truly belonging is an outcome at all levels of the organization. And then when we think about justice, we have to physically dismantle those structural barriers. There's sources, there's opportunities, there's things that happen that prevent communities to fully thrive. And so we have to, and this takes courage. It's not something that you can just say, oh, I'm just going to go and break down that barrier. It takes courage first to assess the situation, understand it. You might have to walk a day in the shoes of the individual, whether it's through school, through work, as one of the clients that your board represents or cares for. Secret shoppers, we call them, right? But sometimes that's what you have to do to identify what are those structural barriers that we have to dismantle so that everyone has justice and can participate fully and thrive.
So, Dr. Stamps, let's just sum it all up. We want everyone to be a Jedi, but we do realize that the landscape, the current landscape, may not allow us, depending on where we have board service. Let's just say if we have, I won't name states or anything where there's a lot of anti-DEI laws, but say you're going to serve on the board in a state at a institution of higher learning in a state that has anti-DEI laws in place. So you want to be cognizant of what it is that you can and cannot do. So I would love for everyone to get familiarized with the Chronicles of Education. Am I saying that right? I'm leaving a word out for Chronicles of Higher Education. They have a DEI tool, and that tool is used to show you the different states that have passed laws on DEI. So I just want you to be cognizant of that as you are getting the as you're being what am I trying to say here? As you're getting starting board service somewhere or getting invited to serve on a board. I don't know why it was so difficult for me to say that, but being
We're
invited,
excited about this work.
I am absolutely, I am, because I was invited to serve on the boards of the 3 hospitals. Someone recommended me and I was invited. So as you're being invited, please, please, please be mindful of the fact that of the current landscape and that there are anti-DEI laws in place.
Absolutely. That's a whole nother presentation.
Is absolutely one.
Awesome. So I'd like to talk a little bit about implicit biases. First and foremost, I love it when people say, I don't have any biases, you know. However, we all have them. They are unconscious, they're automatic mental associations, And they come about because of our processes that we've gone through over years, our experiences and our social environments. And when we think about those processes that happen in our social environments, I'm talking about things like systemic racism, sexism, ableism, ageism, homophobia, transphobia, you name it. And some of these things, and again, this could be a whole nother discussion and education offering, but a lot of these things really happen when we are in high cognitive overload. Like we're so excited tonight, we can't even get our words out sometimes. We're so excited. Um, and if you're tired, right? And so we know that the brain is a powerful, powerful organ. Um, it actually is quite amazing what our brains can manage. Um, we know that there's different types of biases that favor our own in groups. You know, I'm only going to be supportive of nurses in healthcare. Um, I'm only going to be focused on women or, K through 12th graders that are in a particular demographic or zip code. So we all have those biases. It's when those biases impact the care that we give, the decisions that we make that impact the care and outcomes of others, that's when we get into trouble. It's important to know and actually realize that we do have biases and they're going to pop up when we're at our most stressed moment, when we're tired, I always say hungry, hungry, angry, tired, right? And so we have to really be thinking about that. And we know that these implicit biases and explicit biases do have led to discrimination in many cases. Dr. McDaniels.
Well, I think about things like we have microaggressions, but we also have micro inequities, and how that. I'll give you a good example of that. My name is Vivienne, and a lot of people find it difficult to say Vivienne, two syllables, Vivienne. And so I have told them what my name is, and they will tell me, oh, well, I'll just call you V for short. Well, yeah, my dad used to call me V, but I haven't told you, I haven't given you permission to call me V for short. Or a better example of a micro inequity. And it's just you're not really thinking, oh, I'm going to say to call this person another name just to offend them. Um, it's unconscious. You're not thinking about it. Another one is if someone came from another continent. I'll say they came from somewhere like Asia, or they may have come from Africa, and they have a name that you feel is difficult. Why are you going, if they have told you how to say their name, why would you not call them by their name, their preferred name, and not say, well, I'm going to call you Susie for short, when the name is difficult to say. And I had to throw that in. I know that doesn't seem like it aligns with what you're talking about right now, but
Oh,
these are micro inequities. And I want everyone to know you should not be trying to give someone else the name that you prefer them to have because it's easier for you to say. Take the time. That goes back to the iceberg. Take the time to get to know the person better and to learn how to say their name. Ask them to say it phonetically for you. Record it if you have to. But please don't go on to your new appointment on the board and you want to call somebody something that is not their name because it's easier for you. That actually happened to me. So I just wanted to throw that in.
awesome.
So what we are going to do here, and I think most people they are familiar with this implicit association test, but I just want to say that this test does not always work. And that's not me saying that. The authors of the ones who developed this the authors who developed this, they are saying that it doesn't always work, but most of the time it does. And so we were going to share a um, a small clip of it, just so you can kind of, if you have not been introduced to it, you'll see what it's all about.
Awesome.
You're not biased, right? This free online test might tell you otherwise. The Implicit Association Test, or IAT, can reveal racial and gender biases you might not even know you have. Here's how it works. The test asks you to rapidly group a series of images and words. For instance, in one section of the Race IAT, you press a certain key whenever you see a white face or a positive word. You press another key if it's a black face or a negative word. And you have to react as fast as you can. In another section, the associations are reversed. White faces go with negative words, while black faces are grouped with positive words. It turns out that 70% of test takers, white and non-white, respond more slowly when grouping black faces with positive words. The test calls this an automatic preference for white people. Other IAT tests.
Thank you, Dr. Stamps. We just wanted to, in case you had never been exposed to this test, and Dr. Stamps, I think we probably can send this out, the actual link. And they, all of the ones that they see here on the screen are the different types that they can take. And I have done a few of them, and trust me, I already knew I had biases, but I did find out a few of them that I had that I did not know that I had, but always working on them to make sure that um, that no one else can see them. I'm the only person who can see them.
It's so true. You don't really realize until you do conduct some type of assessment.
Yes,
We all think we're quite open, and especially when we work in the space of DEI. But we're all human. We're all human. But you
yes,
know
we
what's
are.
even more interesting is the mind.
Yes,
Mind bugs. Mind bugs are hidden biases that impact every human daily life, our work, our relationships. And if you're in healthcare, mind bugs can actually impact the way that we care for our patients and our families and make decisions, like as a board member, on the impact of your constituents. The human brain can actually process 11 million bits of information per second. 11 million. And only 14 to 40 to 60% of those are processed consciously. We're always on autopilot. And the rest, again, is unconscious. And because so much of that information is being processed in the unconscious, the mind acts like a machine to efficiently and effectively make decisions. And so it really goes through what it knows, what's automatic, right or wrong. And that's why we have to be intentional with this work. We have to really pause and slow down and make sure that we have the various lenses and experiences at the table so that we're making the best decisions. Mind bugs actually create mental shortcuts based on patterns and categories, which in turn create the biases. And these patterns actually are developed through social conditioning, which are things such as our values, our norms, our customs, and in specific communities, even our cultures are being conditioned by our friends, our families, the leaders. Let's not talk about media and social media, and the list goes on. But we
yes.
have to think about, can we trust our own brain at times?
So we want to present to you this video. that I may have to go off camera because I don't know why this video always makes me tear up. But anyway, and I want to say enjoy, but more than that, learn.
Yes.
All rise.
Wow. I tell you, Dr. Stamps, that thing gets me every time. And especially when I have several grandsons and I have been with them out and I have watched people watch them, you know. And I want to say, this young man is an engineer, you don't want to get in defensive mode. But what did you see, Dr. Stamps?
I just saw so many situations that we experience as a Black people that is so common. Just the other day, I was coming out of the bank and I was walking to my car and the person parked next to my car was in their vehicle and you heard their locks click.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, an older white gentleman. And I'm like, I'm going to my car. I'm leaving the bank.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that I'm going to do something to harm you, that you had to lock your doors?
Dr. Stamps, you have one that's actually more um the only word I can think about is egregious. You were driving your car in a town as a can you please briefly share that
Sure.
story?
So in one of my previous roles, I was the chief nursing officer of a regional, in a regional health system, and it was my hospitals were 45 minutes east of where I live, and very rural, and I got stopped not once or twice, but many days, on my way to work, and I do have a little bit of a heavy foot, but everyone warned me don't speed through this particular county. And when I got pulled over, the officer asked me where I was going. I said, I'm going to work. And he asked me if this was asked me for my driver's license. Is this your current um, uh, address? Yes. And he didn't understand that I would work 45 minutes east of where I live. He says, you're going to work? And questioning, like, is this really is this really true? And it was really sad and disheartening and made me nervous, because traveling to and from work as a chief nursing officer, in the dark sometimes, and you get pulled over or they follow you, the police follow you, especially when I'm leaving. It was very nerve-wracking. I was always on the phone with someone because I always feared my safety. And I think it was almost subconscious that I would just get on the phone and stay on the phone with people until I got home. And I always used to say, oh, it's my decompression time, but it was really about safety, especially till I got to the thruway. Being a female, Black, driving, very, very scary times.
Yes, to question whether you were supposed to be in the area. You
Mhm.
know, that part was what troubled me the most.
Yeah.
That somehow, because of how you look, you should not belong in that area, or be able to be in that area. So things like that, and another one was for me. Um, I have a lot of friends who, because I used to be in the music business, I have a lot of friends who are very well known musicians. And I was invited to this event, and the tickets were very pricey, but I was invited, and I didn't have to pay for the tickets. But me and a friend of mine who was white, I was in Boston. We went to pick up the tickets, and the person behind the counter totally disregarded me and started asking her, what's your name? And she was trying to tell him, no, it's not me. It's Vivienne who has the tickets. And that man would not talk to me at all.
Mhm.
To my tickets, right? I invited her to go with me. So it that's what that I think it brings that back to mind whenever I look at that video, things like that.
Yeah. These things
So
set us back sometimes. And, we have to have the strength and the resilience to be able to rise above this and not let us lose sight of where for me, God put me in places that He wanted me to be. And so, situations like this can really deter you or distract you. And even as a board member, you may get some of these experiences, especially as organizations are trying to increase the diversity on their boards. Not everyone is willing and able to be accepting of that. And so you may have some microaggressions. Um, you may have some biases that rise. And sometimes when the time is right, you can address them. Sometimes you have to rise above it.
mhm.
Know that you have to focus on what you're there for to serve that mission.
And you have to decide whether you're going to call it out or call it in,
Mhm.
those type things. And I'm just blessed to serve on a board where I am totally appreciated and acknowledged for the differences that I bring to that board. And that is an amazing thing. It doesn't always happen for everyone.
Yeah. And that actually takes us into allyship and advocacy
Mhm.
and the
Well,
importance of that role. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Well, this is one of my favorite slides. Again, we always have uh, with these sessions, there's always something that's a favorite. Uh, Advocacy is absolutely, I mentioned it earlier. Uh, we have to advocate for those things that we know are right. And we cannot do it alone. Dr. Stamps, how many times have I told you that there's no way that Harriet Tubman would have made it through the Underground Railroad if she did not have some white allies along the way to help get her through? you
Yes.
know I have to say it all the time, because that's really important. allyship is so important. And we hear the term now, but you need to really understand what it's all about. It's about people that you can even go back to some of the marches that you've seen. I'll go back to the march. My mother's first cousin marched with Martin Luther King and John Lewis and all those people. They always had other people that did not look like them that were marching with them for that cause. It's so important. And if you're going to serve on a board, you need to recognize and understand the significance of advocacy and allyship. Dr. Stamps.
Absolutely. You know, another area of diversity is when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community. And it's really important that we understand sexual orientation and gender identity. And so I love the genderbread people. I think it's a great way to not only learn, but remember what all of these terms mean so that we can be better informed. Again, creating that inclusive environment and generating that sense of belonging. And so I'm just going to go through a few definitions here. Sexual orientation is the romantic or sexual attraction that we have to others. It's our heart. And our sexual orientation is independent of any other gender identities that may be the same or different. So remember that orientation, sexual orientation is who I'm attracted to. When we think about gender identity, that's in our brains and our minds. It's how we perceive ourselves. It's how I identify, how I call. For instance, my pronouns that I identify with are she, her, hers. And again, this can be the same or different from the sex assigned at birth of an individual. When we define sex, sex as sex being defined at birth, this is the male, female, or intersex. It's what a physician or a midwife uses to describe us at birth based on our external anatomy. And then we get a little bit deeper into a gender expression. This is how we express ourselves. It's how what the appearance is of our gender identity. This could be our behavior. It could be our clothing. It could be body characteristics such as a beard, no beard, the tone of our voice. These are the things, the variables that share our gender expression. The term cisgender. This is when our gender aligns with the sex assigned at birth. And transgender is an umbrella term, and it incorporates gender identity and expression, different cultural expectations, and it's sometimes based on the sex that someone was assigned at birth, but not always. And then we also have binary or non-binary. Some people identify as non-binary, which is neither man nor woman. At the end of the day, it's about accepting people for who they are, how they show up, their authentic selves. We'd say all these things today, these topics, these definitions, because ultimately our goal is that everyone achieves health equity. This is the underlying commitment to reduce and ultimately eliminate healthcare disparities and the determinants, including those social ones. We know that when everyone is able to achieve or attain their full health potential, we know that we've arrived at health equity. And it's going to take time, right? We know that healthcare disparities is not new. It's been around, they've been around for a long time. We know that there's drivers of inequity. During the pandemic, we actually saw that we have not made the progress that we thought we have. We saw the disproportionate deaths of African Americans and Hispanics. And that really spoke to the complexities and the comorbidities that individuals were experiencing. We know that some of the drivers of inequity are community conditions, violence, drugs and abuse, trauma. We have trauma every day. We hear it on the news. We hear of people sharing their stories. If you're around some youngsters nowadays, just recently I was involved with a training for K through 12th graders, and some of the stories that they tell, the things they've been exposed to, it's so sad. But they're so resilient. Pollution. We know that there's structural drivers like housing, redlining, neighborhoods that are built to not allow you to have success, or really truly have an investment in housing, or housing that's not well kept. Lead issues and structural issues. The lack of transportation. If I can't get to the doctor's office, I might think twice about going. If I can't get to the grocery store, I might choose foods that aren't the best. Access to foods, fresh fruits and vegetables. Education. We growing up, I always learned that education was the key to so much. But we have schools that are where our students can't learn, because they come to school hungry, or they come tired, because they don't have a place to sleep. Many kids where I live don't have beds. We know that financial security and insecurity is a biggie. Financial health for the future, not only now how you're living, but how are you going to live in the future? And we know that the exposures to things such as sexual behaviors, lack of physical activity, what we eat, alcohol and tobacco, secondhand smoke, all impact our health. And these proportionate drivers, you add that to a medical condition, and then we get patients entering the ecosystems with a diagnosis, usually a late diagnosis. The treatment becomes very expensive. There's a lot of long-term management, but it ultimately impacts life expectancy and health status. We know that healthcare systems now are looking at these upstream variables to make an impact. It used to be that we only talked about medical conditions. Now we have to really think about the social determinants of health. And so as a board member, think about your clients, your patients, the people that you're serving, and where can you make that impact? We don't want to wait till they're sick and in the hospital. We want to get to them sooner. How do we get to prevention? Right? So partnering with other constituents such as employers and insurers, social media campaigns that can help impact the community conditions or structural drivers of inequities. I mentioned that the COVID pandemic showed us that, when you look at 12% of the population, but double that died of African Americans, we haven't come as far as we thought we have. Where I live here in Rochester, these are some of the healthcare disparities, but also these poor young ladies down below here. There's a 9-year life expectancy difference just based on the zip code. And the zip code is only less than 10 miles apart. And how sad that we are going to see this young lady on the right, the African American child, live 9 years less than her white colleague here. We know that healthcare disparities cost a lot of money. If we don't do anything to change the trajectory of healthcare disparities, by 2050, we're going to be spending in the US more than $353 billion in healthcare. And we can't afford that. It's going to bankrupt our country. We know that the socioeconomic factors account for about 50%. Throw in the physical, that's 50% of what's driving healthcare outcomes. The health behaviors is only 30%. And we have work to do in healthcare. However, healthcare is only driving 20% of the health outcomes. The social economic factors are the ones that are driving your education, your job status, your family supports, where you live. Those are the things that we have to get our hands around and make a difference. And some people will say, oh, there's no business around this. This is not a priority for our organization. There is a business case for health equity. And when you think about it, our strategy should be focused around this. These are the things as a board member you can advocate for. So let's just break this down a little bit. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but when we think about the consumer in your organization, we have to have trust. Our consumers must trust that from a healthcare perspective, we are going to deliver what we say we're going to deliver. We're going to do it with kindness and respect. And the ultimate outcome is high quality care. If we're not going to deliver that, where do you think the patients are going? To the next organization, to the next healthcare system, to the next community organization. And that really drives your market share and your volumes, therefore impacting your revenue. So there is a consumer value for focusing on health equity. We want to make sure that we have equitable health outcomes, right? When you think about your employees, members of your board, we want to have workforce equity. There's value, we talked about it already, in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It leads to belonging. It speaks to the culture. Dr. McDaniel spoke about that iceberg, what's on the top of the water and what's underneath. If we don't hold on to our staff and our employees, it's going to drive turnover. And what does turnover drive? Cost. And so the cost of care, the cost of the service that we're providing on these in these organizations get out of control. And then we're not able to do the things we want to do. So again, there's a business case for health equity. And we know that there's strategic journeys that organizations can take, whether you're dealing with employees, students, patients. And we always want to talk about attracting and retaining, whether it's an employee, a student when they come in, a patient, right? Because if we turn and lose our patients, we turn and lose revenue and market share. If we turn and lose our employees, we have a reputation. People don't stay, they don't come. And so even from our students, how are we ensuring that we're providing those wraparound services to help them address their social determinants of health, leading to their health equity and outcome? And overall, there's been an evolution of diversity. To say that organizations can have a training session or a class and check the box that we've trained everyone, we're good to go, is really not truthful. We have shifted and continue to shift to a cultural humility perspective. This is having a humble and respectful attitude all the time, not sometimes, not just Monday through Friday or Saturday and Sunday. It's always having a humble and respectful attitude, that realizing that we don't know everything and going to one class does not teach us everything, that it is a lifelong, ongoing goal and process to learn about other cultures and other people. We have to be culturally responsive. This is a way of being. I love it when organizations say, oh, we have a culture, we have a diversity statement. That's nice. Is it woven into your mission? Is it woven into everything you do? Is it that when we're thinking of cultural responsiveness, we're looking at our policies, at our practices? Are we looking at our website? Are we looking at when we're hiring or going through board selection, that we have trained individuals about the biases that come along with making some of those decisions so that we make a more diverse, inclusive decision? So really thinking about cultural responsiveness as a way of being. It's really seen the benefit of diversity. You know, when we stack hands and there's different hands and different lenses, we have a stronger product in the end. That's what we're after. I get so jazzed up about this, Dr. McDaniel.
Absolutely. And you know, I do. This is one of my, again, another favorite topic for me, because as I moved away from the whole idea of cultural competence, which we know we can never be totally culturally competent, I started embracing cultural humility. And from my perspective, it's imperative that that term culture be conceptualized, right, to accommodate every identity that is significant to me.
Mhm.
I always like to give the definitions that I have for cultural humility, and or actually for the term humility. And humility is defined by Merriam-Webster as freedom from pride or arrogance, reflecting, expressing, or offering, or an offered in a spirit of deference. And then the Cambridge Dictionary states that humility is the feeling or attitude that you have no special importance that make you better than others. Think about that. And as you stated earlier, cultural humility involves an ongoing process of self-exploration and self-critique, and it's combined with a willingness to learn from others. And I tell you, I am always learning from others. It means that you are entering a relationship with another person with the intention of honoring their beliefs, their customs, their values. And I talked to you a little bit, Dr. Stamps, about those 5 R's of cultural humility. Those R's being reflection. We talked about reflection. We talked about respect. We talked about regard, relevance, and resiliency. And I believe I gave you some examples of these 5 R's of cultural humility. So think about it as you have a goal, you have an aim, when you are encountering someone, or you're talking to someone. That aim will be that you approach each encounter with humility and understanding that there's always something to learn from everyone. One thing I have issues with is when someone appears to know everything, something about everything, or just what we call them are know-it-alls. I mean, I can't think of any other way to describe it. But when I talk to people, what I ask myself when I finish my conversation is, what did I learn from that person in that encounter? Did I pick up on some facial expressions that they made that may have perhaps said that they didn't like what I said? I think about those things. What did I do? Did I say something that I shouldn't have said? And then with respect, that aim is that one will treat every person with the utmost of respect and strive to preserve dignity and respect. So my ask for that is, did I treat everyone involved in the encounter respectfully? And then with regard, it's the aim is that you will hold every person in their highest regard while being aware of and not allowing unconscious biases to interfere in the interaction. So then I'm going to ask myself, did unconscious biases drive this interaction? And trust me when I tell you that when I'm reflecting and I think about it, sometimes it did drive the interaction. And the fourth R, relevance. The aim is that one will expect cultural humility to be relevant and apply this practice to every encounter. So then you would ask yourself something like, how was cultural humility relevant in the interaction? What did I, what, did I really find it important as I was engaging in the encounter? And resiliency is that you're going to aim to embody the practice of cultural humility to enhance personal resilience and global compassion. So ask yourself this question: how was my personal resiliency affected by the interaction? And it's things like this that you need to think about. As you move to the next slide, Dr. Stamps, basically it's the same thing here that we're talking about. You're going to make this lifelong commitment to self-evaluate everything and self-critique everything every time you have an encounter with someone. And then recognize those power dynamics and imbalances. I know I have to do that as a professor. I have to always make sure that when I'm encountering, when I'm talking to a student, that that student, doesn't think that I have so much power over them. And that institutional accountability, let me tell you, Dr. Stamps, one of the things that I suggested at one of the hospitals where I worked was that they put a sign on the door that says, because, it's all about accountability, that we do not we do not condone racism of any kind within our facility, within our organization, our healthcare system. That means if we have a patient that comes in and that patient says, I don't want that Black girl or that Black guy to take care of my loved one, you need to go back outside and read that sign, because we are not reassigning anybody. And also sign a document, have them sign a document that we have diverse people working at this organization, in this organization, and we are just not going to tolerate it. So accountability is everything to me. And we have already talked about allyship and advocacy. Do you have anything else to add, Dr. Stamps, before we move into the case study?
No, I think you've hit it right on the head. The mere fact that all of this work is intertwined. There's stepping, it's almost like steps, but then we plateau, then we step again.
Yes.
They're like building blocks along the way, to truly make a difference for health equity. And your role as a board member is to drive some of that, to lead some of it, to follow some of it, or to create opportunities to eliminate barriers to get to it. So,
Yeah. So I would like for everyone to take a moment to take a screenshot of this case study, because I want you to be able to go back to this case study and look at it, because we would love if we could hear from some of you. We will give you our emails at the end of this presentation, and we would love to hear from some of you about what you think about this case study. Not what you think about it, but how would you handle this situation using cultural humility. And so I am going to ask my dear colleague, Dr. Stamps, to just read it for us, to read this case study. Oh, you were already on it. There you go.
all right.
Mhm.
So, without notice, you have been given a project by the Chief Executive Officer that has a 2-day turnaround. You are the nurse leader, whether you're in the role of dean, executive director, director of nursing, project lead, department chair, you're the leader, and must call on team members to assist you. You speak to the 2 nurse managers who you supervise and ask them to work with you on developing the project. One of your direct reports asks if she can express her feelings regarding the 2-day deadline at such short notice and states, I will do my best to meet the deadline, but because of the many other projects I'm working on, I may not have time to be able to meet your cutoff date. You respond, we all have busy schedules and projects to complete without any extra minutes to spare. Thinking of cultural responsiveness and the tenets of cultural humility, what did you glean from this encounter?
So what do you see here happening? You know, because I can see just a wee bit of power dynamics happening. But I want you to to look at this case study and think about, just tell me what are some of the things that you see in this situation. I also can see that um, think about validation as well when you're looking at this. Think about that, because if you're looking at the tenets of cultural humility, um, it talks about that reflection. And Dr. Stamps, I think probably we should provide the article with the 5 R's. I love the work that these physicians did on that particular article, talking about those 5 R's of cultural humility. So perhaps we could probably get that out to people, as we are doing these presentations, we could use that as one of the handouts, because it really has helped me a lot. But just looking at this, think about the role that the chief executive officer plays within a organization, or the dean or the executive director. A lot of times people, I don't want to use the word that it's not fear, maybe awe or something like that. Dr. Stamps, help me out here. Um, you know, because of their role.
I think there's a position power, a role power
Mm-hmm.
have. And I think as leaders, sometimes we have to, again, that's a whole nother training and education session. But as leaders, we have to sometimes lead with the why.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this such a short turnaround? Things in healthcare every day happen that you have to reprioritize what happens. And I think as leaders, we have to also give the why.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this important? And then I think when we think about the manager, because when it comes at the top, it does trickle down.
Yes.
And so I think having the opportunity to say, this is what we've been asked to do, what's on your plate that we can, again, help you prioritize. So you're showing some care and concern about the individual to say, Dr. McDaniel, I know your plate is full. We have 3 other projects going on. However, we've been asked by the CEO to do ABC. Let's see, what can we look at on your plate to shuffle, or what can we delegate, or, so that there's a sense of understanding what workloads are, understanding that we were asked to get something done, and also knowing that we're not going to ask people to burn both ends of the candle. How do we do some plate management so that we can get it done and do it well, right? Because we don't
Mm-hmm.
want to just throw them together in a bad and not meet the needs as intended. But I think that also speaks to being able to have some transparent conversation and dialogue, and be willing to take the time, because we're moving so fast. It's like those mind bugs, right? We just want to get it done, and we're blah 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 blah, get it done, but we're not thinking about the impact. And so we have to think about the intent versus impact.
Yes.
Things that we make, on things that we say. And as a board member, you're going to be faced with these things.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to want things done yesterday, but we want it done well. Again, thinking always about how do we bring that diversity of thought, that level of respect and communication into these situations, these dialogues.
Yeah, so I would have to do a lot of reflection on this because I just don't know why I would have responded to that person to say that we all have busy schedules. Because again, I think about validation. I did not validate how they felt about it, how the person felt. And also, um, why am I, you know, why am I not being transparent? Why am I not telling them about how why we need to get this done right away? Why, I work better if you tell me why I have to do something that is urgent, that it's not something that I created, or that you know, I just I hate to say it like this, but I say this a lot. Please don't make your lack of planning my emergency. Your failure to plan cannot be my emergency. And so I would have to sit back and reflect on what I said to this person and how I may have made that person feel. And that's what it's all about, with the 5 R's, and just following the tenets of cultural humility um, altogether.
Wow, Dr. McDaniel, it's been a full evening. I know that our audience may have some questions and they will have our contact information. But first and foremost, I want to thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to partner with you. I learned so much from you. I'm humbled and honored to have been able to present this information with you to future and current board members, keeping in mind the impact that we have on achieving health equity through board service.
Thank you, Dr. Stamps. I should not let you go first, because then you say everything that I want to say about you. So I should not let you go first when we are closing, because I absolutely learned so much about from you, and you are one of my informal mentors. So I'm just so happy that we could do this work together, and I look forward to us working together in the future.
Absolutely. We will. We will. So participants, please take a few minutes to conduct or complete the post-education survey. Again, your feedback is very important to us as we continue to refine and add additional sessions in the future. And we look forward to hearing your feedback. You have Dr. McDaniel and my contact information if there's any questions that you may have. And we thank you for being here. If you're interested in serving on a board, you already serve on one, we ask that you register at the NOBC website to receive information about board opportunities and to log your board service. We want to capture every nurse that is providing board service and those that have an interest but haven't made a decision on a board. So please also scan this and complete a little form, and you'll be on the mailing list and you'll get opportunities as they come forth.
Thank you again.
Thank you.